This is the Hybrid Cloud Partners podcast. I'm Fede Pacheco alongside my co-host Adam Burke, and we're excited to be with you another year. Welcome to 2025, and our biggest aspiration right now is to continue to bring you stories that inspire you and encourage you to explore the latest technologies in the hybrid cloud that can make your organization not only thrive in technology, but of course, make it more profitable and sustainable for your customers and yourself. Today, we're kicking off with Neosystem, a partner we've been working for a little bit over a year. And we're excited to bring you that story and their perspectives and what has made this Azure and cloud transformation so impactful for their organization.
Yeah. So it's great to have Brad and Stuart here with Neosystems. They're a longtime Microsoft partner, but I've had the pleasure of working with them for a little over a year now. Brad and Stuart, maybe you could just give us kind of a quick intro in terms of your roles at Neosystems.
Sure, happy to do that, Adam. My name is Brad Mitchell, as you said. I am currently president and CEO of Neosystems for about 15 months now. And have an IT background in addition to many other backgrounds, but certainly have come up to speed on the partnership and how Neosystems uses and leverages Microsoft in the just over a year that I've been CEO. So excited to be here.
Oh, great. My name is Stuart Itkin. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer with Neosystems and been with Neosystems almost 2 years, but I have a long history in working with Microsoft partner organizations in my role of product marketing at Kronos, which is now UKG, at ExoStar, and most recently before coming to Neosystems with Coalfire Federal. So a long history and a very successful history of working with Microsoft.
Yeah, it has been great to work with both of you. Very much appreciate the partnership. Maybe you could share a little bit more about who is Neosystems.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start and I'll let Stuart add some color to this if he'd like. Neosystems we've been around for about 23 years now. Started by a couple gentlemen specifically to serve government contractors. So we actually support those who support the US government. We started in the managed accounting services. So this is literally your back office accountants that provide services which are very unique to government contractors, as most people would appreciate. A lot of compliance requirements and things go into working with the US government. And so the accounting is very specific there in a lot of very unique skill sets. So that's really where we started about 23 years ago. Quickly expanded into, at the time before hosting was a gleam in people's eye. It was called application service provider business. People were just starting to say, I really don't want a server in my closet that has my ERP or accounting system. So we started really hosting applications for customers just a few years after Neosystems started. Over the years, we've developed like a professional services business, consultants that have expertise in GovCon. And then really about 5 to 8 years ago, we started to see the need for back office IT services and more recently security services in particular in the government contracting space. So again, I'm sure most of your people that are going to be viewing this podcast have heard of CMMC, long time in coming, that the DoD and other government agencies are really wanting to make sure that their supply chains have the adequate security around confidential and non-confidential, controlled unclassified information. So we've been in that space, like I said, now 5 to 8 years, and really started just in the last couple years leveraging Microsoft as a partner towards that end. Stuart?
Yeah, and I think the best way to think of us is a managed hosting services provider and a managed service provider for IT services and managed security services. As Brad said, government requirements are very, very specific. And we work with both very large clients, but as well with a lot of very small clients across the defense industrial base, as well as other sectors of the government. And we certainly find with a number, especially these smaller contractors, the compliance requirements can be very confusing. And we kind of position ourselves as an organization that is comprised of experts, people who is sat in the seats of our clients, people who've done their job, understand their problems, but more important, that we understand regulatory requirements, we understand compliance, we understand reporting requirements, really so our clients don't need to, so that they can focus on their business and achieve their missions of growing their businesses over time.
That's wonderful. And it's something that we've touched upon the last few episodes and pretty much every conversation that we have with partners, which is how are you supporting your customers? And by this brief recap of what you did on everything that Neosystem does, you've kind of told you about your customers that you serve and their concerns, and also have evolved through time to make sure you address those, because not only technology changes but also their needs too. So it's kind of like already got a little ahead of the question that we wanted to ask you, but in general, how would you summarize the way you serve your customers, and particularly what is that focus that you bring to serve them best today?
So, like Stuart mentioned, we do serve all level of customers, but we really kind of think of our wheelhouse as small and mid-sized businesses in particular, right? And what we want to be is kind of the one-stop shop for back office solutions for those customers. As Stuart mentioned, it's often a very confusing ecosystem to enter. People don't know how to report accurately to government, track your costs accurately, make sure you're implementing security, and a million other things. So by providing really all the back office services from accounting to IT to managed HR to managed security, we're really providing that one-stop solution. And especially small and mid-sized businesses, most likely at some point, they're going to outgrow the need for some of those services, like managed accounting services, for example. They'll bring accounting in-house at a certain point. It makes sense for them. But some things like the managed security services, one of the things attractive to that for us is even large businesses need some aspect of that. And that is one of the more complicated areas to provide services for, right? And really a focus area for us growing forward.
Right, because it's not just providing those services. Again, as we said, requirements across government are very unique and very specific. We work with a lot of first-time government contractors, and they've won a contract, and all of a sudden they get handed this pile of regulations called the FAR, and their head kind of explodes when they look at all of those things. And the important secret sauce we bring really is that understanding of compliance and being able to provide technology that certainly complies with the technical requirements, but enabling them to set up their operations and their reporting in a way that they can satisfy all of the other compliance requirements that go along with it. And certainly I think, as we'll tell, Microsoft becomes a very important part of that puzzle.
Yeah, thank you for that background. I think it really paints the picture of the complex environment, and really, I think, a super critical niche for our country as well that you all operate in. I know you've been a long time partner, but I feel like that partnership has really evolved over the last year or two. Why have you found it kind of important to kind of partner with Microsoft as you kind of look to evolve Neosystems on this journey here?
Well, I'd start out by saying, Adam, why wouldn't you partner with the most valuable company in the history of the world, right? But we actually did take a hard look at, as we wanted to grow, especially the IT side of our business, at a lot of the solution providers, both large and small out there. And we really found Microsoft kind of has evolved with us over the last 5 or 10 years, where really moving towards cutting edge technologies, and especially some technologies like AI. I know it's overused buzzword these days, but that really can help us do those things that we think are so crucial for our customers and help us automate and deliver at scale. And we just, quite frankly, didn't see a competitor to Microsoft that came anywhere close to providing that kind of leverage for us.
I think it's more than just the technical aspects of it. A lot of companies that we've looked at are focused on the technical solutions that they bring, but certainly working closely with Microsoft, we see the same commitment to understanding the problems of companies that serve government. And Brad mentioned the CMMC initiative, the security initiative that's being put forward by the Department of Defense. And we worked very closely with individuals within the Microsoft Aerospace and Defense sector who, again, they work directly with the government, and that the understanding that the development of solutions, especially for small and medium-sized businesses that have cost sensitivity, that have usability sensitivity, that it really requires an understanding of the customers, the requirements, and then working cooperatively, because solutions just don't come from technology. They're technology, they're managed services, they're managed hosting, and a lot of subject matter expertise that comes along with it. And Microsoft certainly has been that partner to industry. They've been that partner with us in working to be able to develop solutions to the problems. I mean, I've always believed that companies don't buy technology; they buy solutions to their problems, and you need to understand those problems if you're going to solve them. I think back towards Brad's earlier comment of why not Microsoft, putting on my marketing hat, certainly the brand equity that comes from Microsoft when somebody says, well, who is your hosting partner? Who are you working with? When we say that we're hosting in Microsoft Azure, it certainly means a lot, and it gives our clients just kind of a lot of confidence. Okay, let's move on, rather than if we were using brand O or brand A or some other brand that may be out there.
Thank you for putting it so clearly with your marketing hat, Stuart. I want to piggyback on a couple of things you said, which is, that focus on solutions and specifically the solutions that you want to solve for your customers, right? You made this decision to evolve, and maybe before you were solving data center solutions, and right now you've evolved into something else. I don't need to ask you whether you feel like you're providing more value to your customers today, because I am sure the answer is yes. But there is a question that I don't believe we've asked enough so far in the dozen of partners that we've had in this podcast, which is, why did you leave your data center? What led you to that? The reason why we feel like it's super important, we want to really celebrate your answer, is because we've had people here be either very clear that they don't have plans to exit their data centers fully and they will forever be hybrid. There's perspective. There's others that come to the podcast with a more of a Microsoft lens and are like, you should absolutely do this, it's obvious. Well, the reality probably lies in between. So there is nothing more valuable that you can provide than your perspective into this. And we're super excited to hear what led to that decision.
Well, it's a long story, but we'll try to condense it down as best we can. So I did mention, really within a year or two of Neosystems started, we started hosting our own applications, right? And that was in a small data center. We've since grown pretty significantly since then. Our data center probably generates a third to a half of our revenue easily. And it's a lot of work to maintain a data center, right? You need pretty dedicated staff, and it's not so cheap. And about every 5 years or so, which is the cycle of capital investment, right? You buy a bunch of servers and 5 years you reevaluate. And are we going to buy new servers? Are we going to go to the cloud, right? And really a couple years ago was the first time in Neosystems history, especially looking at Microsoft, that it was more cost effective to do that. We didn't have that initial capital outlay up front, right? And over time, the value proposition of a hosted data center in Azure in particular made a lot more fiscal sense, right? So just from a pure fiscal perspective, there was no denying it was on a big, huge spreadsheet in black and white that this was the right time to do that, right? But of course, there were a lot of other reasons too. So again, we operate in the government contracting environment with the defense industrial base quite a bit, high regulatory environment. Some regulations we're aware of that were coming down the pipe, and there's always something new that might be around the corner. And it's a lot of work to stay compliant with that, a lot of work. Microsoft, of course, in their Azure solution, specifically having government solutions, GCC and GCC High, we know are always going to be on the cutting, bleeding edge of those kind of compliance solutions. So shifting that burden from Neosystems to Microsoft made perfect sense for us.
I was going to say certainly the compliance burden is one too that has continued to increase, and I think one that certainly helped leverage the decision were some of the changes that came from the Department of Defense with respect to FedRAMP equivalency. Uh, CMMC initiative is all about suppliers to the Department of Defense being able to protect the sensitive information with which they are entrusted and the sensitive information that they create themselves. And DoD has long required that cloud services that are used to store, process, or transmit the sensitive information, generally referred CUI, have to be in an environment that satisfies the FedRAMP moderate baselines requirements. Those requirements got more stringent back last December, and it kind of was the crystal ball to say, this isn't the first step. We're going to see increased regulatory requirements, kind of compliance is getting tougher and tougher and tougher. And while we saw Microsoft very clearly laying out for government, here's our strategy, here's our placemat, showing the commercial environment, showing the government cloud environment, and even showing the classified environment, which is kind of where we're headed in being able to deal with clients that are dealing with classified workloads. And it became very clear that those were investments that either we could continue to make or that we could leverage the investments that Microsoft was making, and probably with the understanding that Microsoft was going to be 2 steps ahead of us in terms of understanding where those requirements were going and in the investments that needed to be done. So I think economically, it just made a ton of sense for us to be able to leverage those investments rather than making those investments ourselves. But it was also kind of mitigating the risk of ensuring that the solutions that we were bringing to clients were always compliant, that we were always satisfying those regulations, and knowing that they did so through the partnership with Microsoft.
Yeah, and I think it also, bears repeating again, like I said earlier, a big key part of that is emerging technologies, right? So as we want to grow as a business, we need those cutting edge technologies that allow us to deliver at scale, repeatable. We have a huge orchestration engine behind all the services that we provide. And Microsoft, by far of any other cloud service provider out there, provided those tools and has a roadmap forward for always being on the cutting edge of that.
Yeah, we actually want to ask you more about, the alternatives that you consider. But before that, I do want to say on everything that you've commented on the importance of compliance and data protection. I also host another podcast called No Slides Attached, and we've talked recently with partners across all industries, retail, manufacturing, healthcare. And it's incredible when everybody in their particular industry says, information protection and compliance is critical in this industry. Patient information in healthcare, consumer information in retail, and in your case, government, definitely not the exception. And anybody could make the case that their industry is the one that's most important, but it does make a lot of sense that you not only want to be in the cutting edge for you and for your customer, but also that you want to rely on someone that will always keep you on that edge. So I think this is just something that we can extrapolate here into any venture that not only any company can do, but also that you want to expand upon in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting too from a compliance standpoint. We do hear that from partners as well, where having that Azure infrastructure providing kind of that base layer of compliance, allows you to focus, I think, on other capabilities, above just the infrastructure. As you were kind of looking around the ecosystem, there's certainly other options besides Azure. Can you share any more about kind of what maybe you evaluated and some of the pros and cons, and then why ultimately Azure kind of won out and you selected Azure to go forward?
Well, I think a lot of the answer to this kind of what we touched on a little bit, but we can hopefully expand on it. I don't know what I want to call out your competitors by name. You guys tell me.
No need. Yeah.
But we definitely did look at all the big players in the space and some smaller players that are kind of up and coming. And although some cloud services have been around longer than Azure has, we just really didn't find any that kind of were up to where we needed them to be as far as providing our baseline technical stack, right? And that was due to a number of reasons. Number one, we knew from experience that some other cloud providers provisioning was an extremely long, potential painful process. When you have a customer that needs a server tomorrow, sometimes that can be a challenge in a few of them, right? And certainly expanding the scope of servers and things like that would be a challenge with some of the other providers. So really, a lot of it came down to just ease of working with and responsiveness. We saw a lot in Microsoft. Back to Stuart's point earlier, I think in our experience, Microsoft definitely talked the government contracting talk. And that was key because, again, we've operated in this space for 20 years. When we get on calls with clients, prospective clients, if we can't talk that talk, I've spent 3 decades in this business now, they can sniff you out right away, right? And we can do the same thing with our partners that we're talking to. Across the board, Microsoft knew exactly where we were coming from when we would mention this regulatory requirement or this over here, what CMMC was and what CUI was. They were just immediately on the same page. So you could tell that they've done their homework and they had the right they had the right resources on board that were going to help us go through this. I think another thing that really isn't a minimal reason is Microsoft is the default leader in the work environment for most companies, right? They're using Microsoft Office applications, and so us providing solutions in an Azure tenant, Azure environments that can seamlessly integrate with most companies' Microsoft applications. How attractive is that, right? I mean, it obviously that interaction is seamless. We don't come across too many people still running Lotus Notes anymore. So definitely an advantage there. And again, it comes back to the advanced technology. When I think about in a simplistic view what our security services provide to people, it's really just gathering data and then analyzing data, right? That's really what whether we're gathering data for an employee's laptop, a server in Azure, it's a lot of data that we're gathering and orchestrating and trying to analyze issues with. And especially the AI tools, Microsoft being a ChatGPT early investor and really rolling out Copilot and all the great things we're seeing coming from Copilot, all of those things just really led, to Microsoft being the correct solution for us.
Yeah, and again, when we went to Microsoft and asked about things such as compliance with FedRAMP requirements or compliance with CMMC requirements, how do you specifically address these requirements in Azure GovCloud? There was a placemat that they provided. They provided references, to various blogs and other information that addressed it. Some of the other alternatives that we looked at when we asked questions about, well, how do you address this or how do you address that? The answer we got back was, gee, that's a really good question. Let me get back to you. I think it gave us a lot of assurance that when we asked Microsoft, somebody could tell us exactly that they had the expertise, the understanding. Again, as Brad said, they speak GovCon. We speak GovCon, and it's important to be able to work with a partner that does that. One other aspect, though, that I think fed into the decision is responses from customers. We both have customers that are asking us for Azure hosting and saying, that is our preference. Do you do Azure hosting? As well as when we proactively went out and just talked to existing customers and said, kind of where would you feel most comfortable with our putting your data? Certainly we heard Azure as the answer, loud and clear and much clearer than any other answer that was out there.
Yeah, lots of really insightful reasons that show how thoughtful you were with this decision. I even wrote some down because we went from like the compliance and the regulations. So we talked about provisioning for a minute, expanding the scope of your infrastructure, anticipating some challenges and the answers that you got that were immediate and not, let me get back to you. Customer feedback most recently, Stuart, and of course the integration with M365 and all the innovations. So of course, just to put all the things that you've mentioned already, into a single sentence, but in general, were there any other specific like technical challenges that you, even as you were going into this transition, I'm sure, even though you were, good with the decision you took, you maybe anticipated, these are the things that we want to make sure we get right as we roll out the process, or these things that really we don't need to drop the ball on?
I mean, there's a lot, right? Azure sounds simple in theory, but as you guys know, under the hood, there's a lot of information to know and understand. So we had, our data center right now uses VMware as a solution, right? So really looking to transfer the current customers in our data center and putting them into the Azure environment, we had that challenge. We had to make decisions. Do we want to keep a VMware stack in Azure, which is certainly a possibility and a service Azure offers, or do we want to go to kind of native Azure virtual machines? We did end up doing the later, right? Through a lot of guidance with Microsoft. And a lot of our solutions, in particular, we have what we call reference architectures, right? That we put clients into depending on what their needs are when they come to us. So they, in one company, some employees might have laptops they're working with and interfacing with Azure. Another company, they might be going to Azure Virtual Desktops, AVDs. So learning which the pluses and minuses of each of those and employees trying to do their day-to-day job was definitely a technical challenge we had to learn a lot about. And Microsoft certainly taught us a lot about it. And really learning how, the big learning curve for us was just learning how to deploy effectively in Azure. There's a lot of power there, but as with always a lot of power, you have to learn kind of the right ways to approach it, whether it's using something like Terraform code that can create servers automatically and manage services automatically for us. A whole different skill set that we didn't have, right? That we had to hire in for or learn or have Microsoft show us in some cases. So really across the board, a lot of technical challenges. Nothing we were surprised, nothing that was overly challenging for us. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a lot less burden on our technical people in managing our own data center once you kind of learn all those skill sets to manage Microsoft stacks appropriately.
And I mean, while there was an awful lot to learn, there was an awful lot that we didn't know. And I think, the support and the partnership were really important. I felt that Microsoft kept us from becoming a victim of what we didn't know. Clearly, they had worked with people like us before, kind of knew the path, anticipated the things that we needed to know to be successful. And, as a result, things certainly went much more smoothly than we had anticipated.
Definitely agree.
Yeah, that's great to hear. That's great to hear. And I think you all really kind of summed up, a lot of the challenges, but then opportunities as well that partners kind of go through and navigate, right? There is complexity in all of this. Like this is not something that's simple, but it's been super exciting to see how you guys have really rapidly transformed your business to be able to kind of take advantage of a lot of the capabilities that are out there. So for our listeners here, we're going to go ahead and pause at this point in time, come back for the next episode where we're going to continue the conversation. We'll touch on, I think, some key learnings, but really how Neosystems has continued to evolve and grow as part of this transition.
That's right. The second part of this episode will be available in a couple of weeks. So stay tuned with us. And of course, we welcome your feedback and comments in our LinkedIn community, as well as in our YouTube channel. We look forward to the next part of our conversation with Neosystems in a couple of weeks. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Stay tuned for more insights and stories from Microsoft's Data Center Optimization team. Be sure to stay connected at dco.microsoft.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.